Hello, thank you very much for joining me again. With some really special stuff going on in America at the moment, I thought it would be a fantastic opportunity to make one of the quintessential American drinks, the old-fashioned cocktail. One of our biggest sellers in the bars, something's a real crowd pleaser, it's become really popular. I'm not going to focus on the history of the cocktail, I'm going to focus on the techniques to make this cocktail well. Stick to these key tips and you will be laughing. We're going to need a spoon, we're going to need an old-fashioned glass, we're going to need an orange, we're going to need some Angostura bitters, and we're going to need some soft brown sugar. Right then, one of the biggest mistakes people make with old-fashions is they make a syrup. That is not how you make an old-fashioned. The way you make an old-fashioned is to dissolve the sugar slowly by melting the ice by stirring it as we go. This is the initial bit of... Forgot the booze. You're also going to need some alcohol. Forgot that bit. You're also going to need some bourbon. And this is where it gets exciting because the variations of different spirits that you could be using for this are huge. But for today's video, I'm going to be using one of my favorite bourbons, a long-standing favorite of mine, which is Buffalo Trace. Got a high rye content, making it a little bit spicier, really versatile and really good for an old-fashioned. I know there's a lot of concern out there about being sponsored. I'm not sponsored by anybody. I'm just using this because I happen to love it, not because they're sponsoring me, okay? Hashtag no sponsor. No sponsorship? I don't know, what do you say? What do the kids say these days? Jack would know. Oh. Great, now we're ready to begin. We're gonna put in our soft brown sugar, but I wanted to highlight potential variations. So in Merchant House, one of the things that we do is we play around with the different sugars and the different bitters that we use, and that way we can tailor them towards the spirit of choice. So I've pulled out 3 different examples of sugars. So we've got a cookie dough, fig, green matcha tea sugar, but we've also used things like coconut sugars, pineapple sugars, banana sugars, and different types of actual sugar itself, like muscovado and demerara sugar. So you can absolutely play around with the sugar that you're using. For this one, I'm just going to be using some soft brown sugar, going to make it nice and classic. Lovely stuff. Now with modern day spirits, really high quality stuff out there, you don't need much sugar because it's already a sippable product. What we're really doing here is we're taking a product that would traditionally have been quite harsh, a little bit more aggressive, and we're taming it. We're adding a little bit of sweetness and enhancing the aromas with the Angostura bitters and the orange zest. We just have to bear in mind that nowadays we're using high quality spirits, so we don't need as much of the sugar. In with the sugar, not too much. Next thing is a couple of dashes of Angostura bitters. Any more and you're going to overpower what's going on in our beautiful spirit. And then an orange zest. For this, I'm just going to take a potato peeler, go down the length of the orange, which is going to take off an awful lot of the pith. The pith, the white stuff, really quite bitter. So we want to remove as much of that as possible. The bitterness is coming from the bitters that we've added. We don't want extra bitterness from our orange zest as well. Give it a little twist to help extract some of those oils, and I'm just going to drop it in there. One of the main keys to a drink like this is the quality of the ingredients. The second is the quality of the ice that you're using. There's a big difference between using a proper ice block and something that just doesn't quite cut the mustard. This is going to melt far quicker and not do what we want it to. Bigger the better. If you're making cocktails at home, you'd be better off taking a Tupperware, filling it with water, freezing it, and getting a nice big block. I'm going to take 2 large ice cubes. And now for the fun bit. I'm going to take my large jigger and I'm going to fill it with beautiful bourbon. A little bit of a splash goes straight into the drink and the rest just stays in the jigger. Not for me to sip on whilst I'm making it. But actually that sounds like a good idea. Using the reverse end of the bar spoon, it's going to be much easier to stir it. Okay, so we can just stir this around now. Instantly we're mixing it. If you remember from the martini video that I made, the dilution is going up and the temperature is going down. Third thing here, the sugar is being dissolved. There's no denying it, this does take a while. It takes a while for the sugar to dissolve and for it all to just melt down and start to lengthen the drink. So we just have to be patient. We're stirring it. The quicker we stir it, the more it speeds up that dilution. The ice cubes, so they're getting smaller and they're starting to round off on the edges. I don't know if you can see that there. This is starting to get longer and longer already, and the sugar is starting to dissolve in there, but it's still quite a bit of sugar sat at the bottom. So once we've been stirring for a certain amount of time and the ice cubes are starting to round off, the sugar's starting to dissolve and it's starting to lengthen up a little bit, we're going to add in a few more ice cubes and we're going to add in a splash more of our whiskey. We're just building it as we go. By me adding more ice at this stage, I'm slowing it down a bit. I want to make sure that I'm in control of what's going on. We've now got a total of 4 ice cubes in there, and you can see the drink is already starting to build up. I'm excited. The smells that are coming off this are so exciting. I can smell the bourbon. There's that classic corn note, vanilla-y note to it, but there's also that wintry spice element, cinnamon and nutmeg, and there's a caramel note. It's probably coming from those barrels along with the vanilla. Yummy. Just having my first little taste. This is not a drink I would recommend tasting all the way through. Reason being is because it's evolving so much and all the time. We've got more whiskey to add, more dilution, and more dissolving of that sugar. So it's really not going to be right until we get to that final moment. So we're just continuing to dissolve that sugar, just being patient. And this whole process might take somewhere in the region of 3 to 5 minutes. I'm going to add a bit more whiskey and a bit more ice. We're getting close now. It's really starting to look like a proper drink now. This is all about patience. This is stirring and stirring and stirring and building as we go and diluting the ice. Just dedicate our time to building this drink up. But of course, what we could be doing on a bar or at home is having conversation. This is a fantastic opportunity to engage with guests, people that you're making drinks for. I don't want this any sweeter. What I'm going to be doing now is adding more ice in to slow the dilution down, and I'm going to finish off by topping it up with the rest of the whiskey that's in our jigger. 2 more large ice cubes are going in. Fail. And the rest of the whiskey from the jigger. This final stir is just to pull it through, is just to mix it a little bit so that you don't have a layer of neat whiskey followed by your old fashioned underneath it. One little last taste just to check, and I'm very pleased. Cheers. So that's how I make an old fashioned, but what has really gone on there? Handful of things I just want to summarize. Got to start with a good spirit. Avoid adding any extra bitterness from your orange zest. Give it a twist to extract as much of the oils as possible. Choose a bitters that you think will suit and complement your spirit of choice. Most people would be very pleased with a classic Angostura bitters. Try not to add too much sugar. There's plenty of good sugars out there for you to play around with. Use large bits of ice. And finally, I'd say take your time. This is a drink that takes time. Don't try and cut corners. Lastly though, I'd just give one little caveat. Don't feel restricted to using bourbon. Classically it's a bourbon, but why not play around with what spirit goes into it? So what are my key takeaway points? Good spirit, good ice, classic bitters, don't overpower it with too much sugar, and take your time. I hope you've enjoyed watching the video. I've enjoyed making this old fashioned for you. I look forward to hearing your comments below. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Delicious.